Peugeot wants to be a key player in the plug-in hybrid part of the mid-sized SUV segment with this car, the 3008 Hybrid. It looks smart, certainly makes the efficiency numbers, and will work well as a package for a family buyer wanting a degree of EV tech but not quite ready to take the plunge into full battery motoring. But though the plug-in technology on offer here is pretty cutting edge, it's also pretty heavy and pricey. Plug-in hybrid technology may turn out to be one of the more short-lived of the motor industry's propulsion options. The first plug-in hybrids didn't arrive until around 2015, and there's talk of future legislation banning them by 2035, though in a post-COVID world, who knows how far that deadline might be extended. What we do know is that right here and now, plug-ins or PHEVs are often the undecided green motorist's preference, even though they're no longer government incentivized. The fully electrified commuting mileage, the absence of range anxiety, and low taxation of PHEVs are all tempting. But the elephant in the room remains the high cost of this technology, which reflects in the price of all current contenders, including the one we look at here, the Peugeot 3008 Hybrid. Can it stack up? Well, let's find out. This isn't the first time we've seen a hybrid 3008 model. The first generation design was available in electrified form too, but that was a self-charging setup mated to a diesel engine. This time round, a 1.6 litre petrol turbo power plant is mated to an 8-speed auto gearbox that's been blended with more advanced plug-in hybrid technology that allows for 36 miles of WLTP rated all-electric driving range. This powertrain features in two flavours, in 225 horsepower form in the front-driven 3008 Hybrid, or in 300 horsepower guys in the all-wheel drive 3008 Hybrid 4, the latter variant featuring two electric motors, a 108 horsepower unit on the front axle and a 111 horsepower motor on the rear axle, hence the nominal all-wheel drive capability. In both cases, the way that petrol progress is seamlessly integrated with electrified power is very impressive, and the whole package feels as quick as those output figures might suggest. Rest to 62 miles an hour in the Hybrid 4 takes just 5.9 seconds en route to a 146 mile an hour maximum, or an 84 mile an hour all-electric maximum. So it ought to feel pretty quick. Well, it does to a point, but things are rather blunted, as usual with this class of car, by a somewhat prodigious curb weight. The plug-in powertrain adds a substantial 360 kilograms over the weight of a 2-litre diesel 3008, or around half a tonne over a base petrol version. That's an awful lot of extra bulk to carry around, and even with 520 Newton meters of pulling power on tap, you feel that from behind the wheel, especially if you try and chuck this car around in the kind of manner a typical owner never would. You get 4 driving modes, with the one you'll be using most of the time being the hybrid setting that chooses the best mix of electric and petrol propulsion to suit the driving style whilst optimizing efficiency. The alternative settings are either Sport, where the car combines the power of the electric and petrol motors to offer livelier performance, all-wheel drive, and Electric, which is battery power only. As usual with plug-in models, visual differentiations from standard variants are few. In this case, that means special dichroic badging, which you'll find here at the front on the wings. There's also an extra filler flap and a cyan light that shines from the interior mirror when the car is in all-electric motion. Otherwise, this is like any other second generation 3008, which means it's very sleekly styled, but at 4.4 meters long remains one of the more compact crossovers in the mid-sized SUV segment. The rear end has special dichroic badging too, and as usual with a 3008, something of an upright stance, though the effect is softened by a neat roof spoiler and a polished black strip incorporating LED tail lamps arranged, as Peugeot puts it, like slashes from a lion's claw. Inside, the hybrid model changes are subtle in this very high quality cabin. There's a little lightning bolt piano key button just below the centre dash infotainment screen, which accesses various hybrid specific functions. There's an extra energy display option for the instrument binnacle screen. We'll get to that. And the auto gearbox lever gains an extra B option so that regenerative braking force can be altered. That's about it. As ever with a 3008, the interior feels of much higher quality than you'd expect from a volume brand, aided in sophistication by a digital instrument binnacle screen and a huge display for the central monitor. As usual with a modern Peugeot, there's an iCockpit dash layout that you'll have to get used to that leaves you looking over the smaller steering wheel at the instrument binnacle rather than conventionally through it. That wheel has integrated paddles and is small and low set, facilitating a wrist flick quality of steering feel that Peugeot reckons its owners really like. It features flattened top and bottom sections so that when you adjust the thing, it's easier to find a position that doesn't either brush your knees or obscure the gauges ahead. A few writers still complain that they can't see the digital dials unless they position the wheel lower than feels natural, but none of our testers have experienced that problem. A word about those instrument gauges. They represent another of this cabin's defining talking points. Conventional dials completely replaced by this fully configurable and customizable 12.3-inch colour screen. We mentioned earlier its extra energy display option, which shows a power meter with power, eco and charge sections to help you drive more economically. That power meter turns sideways on the right hand side of a second screen layout option, driving. And there are 4 other screen layout options available: personal, minimum, dials and navigation, all accessed via a roller switch on the left hand side of the steering wheel. This prompts intricately animated changes from the state-of-the-art animation and gives visual priority to speed readouts, navigation mapping or driving safety features. Or you can choose to view only the absolute minimum of information if all of that gives you a headache. With the personal option, you can decide what the 2 main virtual dials will show: power meter, driving aids, engine info, a G-force meter, temperature, media, navigation or trip computer info. Just about everything else you'll need to know can be found on what looks like a tablet PC attached to the fascia, a multifunction colour touchscreen that's 10 inches in size. This works well, though is sometimes a little slow to respond to requests. It can, like the instrument layout, display in your choice of 2 colours, blue or copper, as it deals with the usual stereo, phone, navigational and informational functions. It also has a mirror screen feature that via the MirrorLink or Apple CarPlay systems allows the monitor to show certain apps from compatible smartphones. We were less pleased to find this screen also burdened with the ventilation controls. In our view, key things like that are much better separated out. Still, on the plus side, the menus on this display are easier to access than they are in some other PSA Group models, because these beautifully crafted piano-style keys just below the monitor offer instant shortcut options to the monitor's most commonly used functions. These include the lightning bolt key we mentioned earlier. Let's take a look in the back. Now, because this design was created from the very outset to accommodate battery power, there's no compromise in rear seat accommodation, and a couple of adults will be quite comfortable. This low centre transmission tunnel means that 3 folk could be accommodated reasonably easily too. There's an armrest with integrated cup holders, and on plusher models you can have useful touches like this central 220-volt 3-pin socket. If you stretch to a model with this full-length glass panoramic roof, which comes complete with lovely blue strip ambient lighting around its edges, the cabin will feel particularly light and airy. Boot space is perhaps inevitably compromised considerably by the battery placement, down to 395 litres from 520 litres normally. The fuel tank size is 10 litres smaller too. In compensation, Peugeot offers an extra 25 litre underfloor storage area for stowing the cables, and a ski hatch so that you can push through longer items into the cabin. Use these cargo sidewall catches to retract the 60/40 split rear bench, and you'll find that the seat's folded capacity is 1,357 litres, down from 1,482 litres in the standard model. Be prepared to pay quite a premium if you want plug-in hybrid capability for your 3008. You'll almost certainly be looking at the front-driven 225 horsepower version, because the more powerful all-wheel drive 300 horsepower derivative we've got here is prohibitively expensive. Let's start with some perspective. Diesel Auto 3008 models start from around £30,000 or around £34,000 with the top 2-litre Blue HDI engine. Front-driven 3008 hybrid pricing kicks in from around the £35,000 mark for base active premium trim. Add a little more for the mid-range Allure spec we'd recommend, also offered in plusher Allure premium form. Ideally though, you'd want this top GT level of trim, also available in flagship GT premium form. The aforementioned 300 horsepower hybrid 4 model, which is what we have here, is offered in two forms: GT spec for around the £45,000 mark, and this top GT premium trim for around £47,000 or more. Yes, really. So, as you can see then, the value lies further down the range. In truth, you don't really need all-wheel drive or an extra 75 horsepower in this car, and base Allure spec gives you all the kit you could reasonably want. That includes a connected 3D navigation system, 18-inch alloy wheels, keyless entry, a colour reversing camera, ambient lighting, power folding door mirrors, and all-round parking sensors. GT Line trim adds a contrast coloured black roof, front fog lamps, full LED self-leveling headlights, a wireless charging mat, and sportier styling. And with top GT spec, you get intricately stitched leather upholstery, a surround view camera system, massaging front seats, and a Focal premium hi-fi system. Let's get to the figures. We've covered the 36-mile WLTP rated all-electric driving range. It's actually more like 25 miles in real-world use. And we also ought to apply real-world thinking to projections of likely fuel economy, because the Fantasyland official combined WLTP figures up to 222.3 miles to the gallon for the hybrid and 235.4 miles to the gallon for the hybrid 4 aren't likely to be replicated by the average owner. As a feather foot, we suppose 80 to 90 miles to the gallon might theoretically be possible, but your realistic average is going to be much less than that, and certainly less than you'd get from the equivalent diesel model. Rely on the petrol engine alone and you'd struggle to average 35 miles to the gallon. You might have noticed from this that the four-wheel drive version is slightly more efficient, and that holds true for WLTP emissions, rated at up to 39 grams per kilometre for the hybrid 4 and up to 41 grams per kilometre for the 3008 hybrid. These readings will mean attractively low benefit in kind figures, a 12% benefit in kind rate for the hybrid 4 as opposed to 27% for an ordinary 3008 GT diesel. At the time of this test in autumn 2020, that meant earners in the 40% bracket would pay £2,240 per year for the hybrid 4 model, almost half what they'd have to find for the equivalent diesel variant. For a base 3008 hybrid, company car tax could be as little as 10% in the 2020 to 2021 period, rising only to 11% to 12% in the following 2 years. Bear in mind that you'll need to find £500 extra to upgrade your 3008 hybrid to a model incorporating a 7.4 kilowatt-hour fast charger that would be capable of accepting charge from anything faster than a domestic 3-pin socket. This halves charging time when charging with a typical garage 7 kilowatt wall box, and it really ought to be standard. Charging the 13.2 kilowatt hour battery takes 3 hours 45 minutes with a standard Mode 3 Type 2 cable, or 1 hour 45 minutes if the optional onboard charger has been fitted. You can use a provided smartphone app to set low tariff charging times, and Peugeot is offering buyers 6 months free use of the Polar public charging network. Insurance groups vary between 26E and 28E for a front-driven model and 35E for the hybrid 4 variant. You can certainly see why someone might be drawn to this 3008 hybrid. It's a far more complete product than the first generation diesel electric version ever was, and the stats are tempting. For the front driven version, up to 222.3 miles to the gallon, up to 41 grams per kilometre of CO2 and 36 miles of all electric range. It arguably looks smarter and more fashionable than its identically engineered Citroën C5 Aircross hybrid and Vauxhall Grandland X hybrid PSA Group cousins too. But this car, like those models, is somewhat hobbled by its pricing. You've really got to want plug-in tech to pay a £3,000 premium over diesel power, and that's for the front-driven versions. Nudging up towards and above £45,000, this four-wheel drive 300 horsepower hybrid 4 version really does price itself rather out of contention, unless you happen to view the Peugeot brand from a premium perspective. If you're attracted by a 3008 hybrid, stick with a base front-driven Allure model, then get a decent deal on one. Translate that into affordable finance, and finally, this product starts to make some sort of sense. Sophisticated sense, which of course was always the original intention.